Jamaica, how did disrespect and violence against women become so normalized? How did we get here? I'm sure by now you've seen the video circulating showing a businessman who having strong ties with government officials brutally assaulting a nurse on the street, dragging her out of her car, spitting on her and stepping on her head. And he wanted to kill her. Listen, this is not just an attack on one woman, you know. It's an attack on every mother, sister and daughter, every little girl in Jamaica. But let me ask you this question. What if we didn't have a video? What if there was no one around to beg for this woman's life? Then we would hear say some gang members or she must have been involved in something or some ghetto youth murder. But as the Bible says, we don't fight against flesh and blood, but with principalities in higher places. It's the same way ghetto youths get blamed for every little thing. But now we see it with our own eyes. This crime, this one may just came from a higher place.
A black woman in her nurse's uniform, driving to work, a public servant, going to provide health care to many sick, alien, suffering persons, Jamaicans, encountered the unprecedented embodiment of evil in this most hideous, ugly, wicked, and detestable form. What she encountered, we're trying to understand, but we cannot understand that, for what she encountered was not human. What she encountered was reptilian, it was cold, it was repugnant, it was despicable, it was alien, it was devoid of empathy. What we saw on that video, the images, verbally and physically abusing a woman, throwing her around on the ground like a rag doll, trampling over her body, standing on her, spitting in her face, stomping on her head. It was ghoulish. It was a nightmare. And this is what we are faced with. This is our reality. This is our reality. And we can't ask but help the question. We can't help but ask the question, you know. Would a white woman in her place have been treated with such ruthless abandon and disdain? And I am asking the question because we must ask it. Black women and black girls on this island in Jamaica cannot feel safe. We cannot feel safe. All civil servants, concerned citizens should take to the streets in solidarity, but also on behalf of ourselves in opposition to this continued violence against women, against children and the vulnerable. Because what we have is a failing state. And if we do not stand up now, we've got to take a stand even if we're sitting down. Tomorrow the Nurses Association will protest. The midwives will protest. The women will protest. But we ask the men to join and lock hands with us and protest in the streets. Something has to be done. Let us do what we can. What do you have in your hand? Use it. Reverend Kobe Little, thank you so much for joining us on the phone lines. You are, of course, in Jamaica for a very special event, celebrating and paying tribute to 100 years of Malcolm X.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on the program.
You've come in for a very special tribute in celebration of 100 years of Malcolm X. We're going to talk about that in a minute. This is going to be at the University of the West Indies tomorrow, so please write that down in your diaries. We're going to be talking to Reverend Little a little bit about Malcolm X himself. We played this morning Ozzy Davis, the eulogy that remains burnt in so many of our minds. But Malcolm X, Reverend Little, even as we celebrate and pay tribute to him, he once said you can't have capitalism without racism. And as we find ourselves in a period where there's talk about Donald Trump is telling us that he's resetting the table. From the World Economic Forum, they tell us that we're going through a global reset. We see that with our own two eyes. We're in 2025. Neoliberalism is the order of the day, but we're moving into technocracy and transhumanism. And we see so much of what we know, or what we have come to know, capitalism 2.0, all of that collapsing around us into a more surveillance kind of technocracy system. How would Malcolm X interpret today's global economic order, do you think, 100 years after?
Well, the unfortunate environment that we find ourselves in, as you have very aptly described, simply shows us the timeless nature of Malcolm X's teachings. Malcolm X calls us to organize. Malcolm X calls us to unite. Malcolm X calls us to work in a collective fashion. And he reminds us that whatever our diversity is, whatever our differences are, at the end of the day, white people act in oppressive manners because we are black. It doesn't matter, he says, if you're Episcopal or if you're Baptist or if you're Methodist or you're Muslim. It doesn't matter if you're a moose or an elf. The reason they're oppressing you is not because of those minor differences, but because you're black. And Malcolm works in a way to take complex themes, complex ideas, and make them very simple. When addressing the issue of our African identity, Malcolm says, if a cat has kittens in an oven, does that make them biscuits? Mm-hmm. And, of course, the answer is no, they're kittens. And in the same way, if African people have children in Europe or they have children in North America, at the end of the day, these children are still African children. And this is a theme that we would all be well served to observe. We hear people talk saying, it doesn't matter where you come from. If you're a black man, you're an African. Mm-hmm. This notion is important politically. It's important in terms of developing community, but it's also central to the healing of the African psyche for those of us who have been subjected to colonialism, those of us who have been subjected to the rape and pillage of human trafficking, to be able to have clarity on our identity and to feel positive about our identity, mm-hmm. to know that black is beautiful, to know that we are African people who come from a long line of history and contributions to humanity, makes a difference, especially when you live in a society that places a premium on Europeans and demonizes people of African descent. So one of the things that I love about Malcolm X is that he took complex themes, complex ideas. He addressed very important issues, and according to his own motto, he made it plain. Mm-hmm. And so we appreciate Brother Malcolm for his very sharp critical analysis.
Yes.
One of the beautiful things about Malcolm X was that he was able, through his teachings, to display his incredible intellect, but he always did it in a way that included everyone and never made anyone feel put down. And so, in an age where Donald Trump seeks to make $1 off of everything, in an age where Donald Trump seeks to spread hate, in an age where Donald Trump seeks to invoke real politics, where might makes right, Malcolm's clarion voice, his orientation towards justice, his call for us to unite globally in Pan-Africanism, his call, which, often people paint Malcolm as a radical, but radicalism is relative. Malcolm was radical because what he advocated for black people, white people didn't want black people to have. But what he advocated for black people is what every nation of people expects to have for themselves. The ability to self-define, the ability to self-determine, the ability to control the politics and economics of our
and you know what? That takes me. Sorry to interrupt, but this takes me to Mortimer Marcus Messiah Garvey and that foundation that Brother Malcolm had himself, which is a foundation of Garveyism, his parents being Garveyites, and even though after he left home we saw him going off into petty crime, but later on he came right forward, moving through religion and faith into this wider concept of Garveyism. And this is what I hear you articulating just now. Could you elaborate on that and how Mortimer Marcus Messiah Garvey informed his ideology and his actions later on?
Well, the Right Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey is rightly a Jamaican national hero. But the truth is, he is a Pan-African hero. He is a hero and an inspiration to African people all over the planet. And here's why. Marcus Garvey was adept at organizing. He was adept at communicating. And he was quite accomplished in terms of casting his vision for black unity and black strength. Malcolm X was a phenomenal, unique person in his time. And yet, he followed in the tradition of Ida B. Wells. He followed in the tradition of Marcus Garvey. And while I'll be in Jamaica on Monday, for the program at the University of West Indies, and we look forward to seeing everybody from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Right now, I'm in Grenada. And I'm here in Grenada.
I thought you were on the island. Okay, good morning, Grenada. All right, yes, go ahead.
I'm here in Grenada to celebrate Mother Louise Langdon Little. Mm-hmm. This is Malcolm X's mother, who was born in Grenada and who was active in the UNIA, the organization founded by the Honorable Marcus Garvey. She was active in this organization in Grenada, and then took the teachings of Marcus Garvey, the teachings and the work of the UNIA to Canada, and then to the United States. Mm-hmm. And with her husband, the Reverend Earl Little, they moved to Omaha, Nebraska, to be missionaries for the UNIA, to spread the message of black unity, to spread the message of black empowerment, to spread the message of economic success for black people with the teachings of the Honorable Marcus Garvey. So I raise all this to say that Malcolm didn't find his way to Garveyism. Mm-hmm. Malcolm was born into the tradition of the UNIA and Garveyism. And it does us well to see and recognize and remember the long-standing connectedness that we as African people have all over the planet. Yes, of course, it's the gene, the bloodline. Mm-hmm. But it's also a very, very clear, shared, common thinking, a shared story of activism, a shared story of striving for what's best for our people. And unfortunately, a shared story of repression by white people who didn't want to see us succeed. But even in the face of that repression, we've had a very strong tradition of resistance and revolution.
Of course. And you mentioned bloodline. You yourself, the Reverend Kobe Little, I'm sure everybody heard when I said that just now. You are a blood relation to Brother Malcolm.
Well, I tell you, I see myself as a son, a spiritual son of Malcolm X. Yes, I am a descendant of Littles. My father's baby sisters and Malcolm X's daughters are the same age and lived and worked in New York at the same time. And that work at the radio station brought them together. They have established that they're cousins, but we haven't done. I have not done the DNA testing,
the ancestral work. Yes, but so I get you a spiritual son in the meantime, and you talk about that connection, which on so many different levels between us and among us as a people. I looked at, and I've been going through this again, looking at those last few years of Malcolm X's life when he left the Nation of Islam and started the OAAU, and what he began to do, which was to reach out to Africa, and that connection that he was making with African leaders in North Africa and Central Africa and West Africa and South Africa, and back to other, we saw him at Oxford University, for example. We saw him at the United Nations. And I just looked at that and I said to myself, the next rung, it seemed to me, and the next step for him was really a fulfillment in action of Mawlamu Marcus Messiah Garvey. And this is why I raised the question that we know he was born into it, and we know he understood it on many, many different levels. But he was really living the teachings of all the ancestors, and Mawlamu Marcus Messiah Garvey, who said, "Look to Africa." You know, this was phenomenal to me. What he was about to achieve. What is our responsibility when we talk about Malcolm X 100 years after? Do we just celebrate today and forget? What would you say is our responsibility?
Frank Fanon said each generation must
yes
identify their destiny,
yes,
and either
fulfill it or betray it. Yes, fulfill it or betray it.
So, in the face of what Malcolm has done, the ancestors who supported him, the ancestors who led Malcolm to the heights which he climbed, the question that they ask us is, you've seen what Malcolm has done. Mm-hmm. You've seen what he did with the resources he had in the environment that he lived. Mm-hmm. What now will you do, not only to honor his work, but to continue the march, to continue the struggle, to continue the climb to self-determination and to self-love? Mm-hmm. You know, one of the great joys of my life is that I have been able to meet and know and work with the Honorable Stephen Golden, who is, as you know, president of UNIA, and in Jamaica, and one of the
yes.
Key lessons of Malcolm X was join an organization. Malcolm called for every black person, wherever they were, to join an organization and to come into fellowship and to relationship with other black people to work on behalf of black people. So we each must join organizations. It's not enough to scroll through Instagram and like and comment on posts about black history. We've got to get involved. We've got to have real conversations and build relationships and plan and execute a strategy that advances our people. Execute a strategy that eliminates disunity. Execute a strategy that holds black government officials accountable and prevents them from having the room to betray us, the room to allow for economic inequality. We are that vanguard that holds the business community and the government accountable, and we do that through organization.
Yes.
And when we do that job well, we can sing as Tuck said, where are you going to run to? Down, Presser, man. Where are you going to run to? Where are you going to hide? The sea won't hide you. The rocks won't hide you. The mountains won't hide you. But we have to do that work, and we have to do that collectively. What Malcolm also taught us was that we have to be people of integrity. And the way he taught that best, I think, is when he said he'd never trust a man without a watch.
Yes.
And on the face of it, it seems like a fashion statement.
That's true, yes.
But what Brother Malcolm was saying is, if you don't have a watch, how can we know
what time
that you are going to be where you say you're going to be when you say you're going to be there?
And the metaphorical meaning is phenomenal in terms of what time is it, you know. You're going to come in from Grenada for tomorrow, and let me just let our listeners know that the Faculty of Social Sciences, the Department of Sociology, Psychology and Social Work, they're presenting at the University of the West Indies a special 100th birthday anniversary commemorative Malcolm X lecture. And you will be delivering that lecture, the main speaker, celebrating the legacy of Malcolm X, renowned activist and Pan-African champion, it says here. Reverend Kobe Little is a keynote speaker. A little bit of what you will be focusing on when you come in, Rev?
Absolutely. I'm grateful to the University of West Indies and Professor Michael Bennett for the invitation. It is a great honor to speak to the life of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. And so I think the most important thing that I will try to impart is that we have to be critical thinkers. But in addition to thinking, we have to take action. And we have to take action with integrity and with love. One of the amazing things about Malcolm X was his tremendous amount of love for black people. Even in the face of so much trauma, even in the face of so much self-hate, Malcolm was motivated by his love for black people, to serve black people, and to fight on behalf of black people.
We look forward to hearing you at the University of the West Indies tomorrow. That's Monday, May 19. And once again, it starts at 6 o'clock, as you said earlier, Reverend Little, between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. And this will be at the multifunctional room near the main library at UWI Mona campus. Also speaking, introductory remarks tomorrow from Dr. Michael Barnett. And you mentioned Stephen Golding earlier. Introductory remarks also from Stephen Golding. So this is happening tomorrow at the University of the West Indies. Reverend Kobe Little will be there. You can meet him in person, listen to him talk in person, and I suppose afterwards ask him questions in person. Reverend Little, safe travels, a safe journey into Jamaica from Grenada. I suppose you're leaving today?
I'll be there in time for tomorrow's program. We pray.
I hear you.
We pray that all goes well.
Yes.
Like I said, I'm coming with great anticipation.
Yes.
I'm so grateful to you as well for inviting me on the show and sharing this early morning moment with me and allowing me to speak to all of your listeners across the country.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, my brother, Reverend Kobe Little, there coming into Jamaica for the Malcolm X lecture tomorrow at the University of the West Indies. Thank you so much. And once again, ancestral guidance as you come in.
God bless.
All right. So let me just quickly tell you once again where this will be. So it's a Faculty of Social Sciences at the Department of Sociology, Psychology and Social Work. They are presenting a special 100th birthday anniversary commemorative Malcolm X lecture celebrating the legacy of Malcolm X. And that will be tomorrow, of course. Once again, the venue is at UWI, University of the West Indies, the multifunctional room near the main library at UWI Mona campus. It starts at 6 o'clock. It goes through until 9. Speakers will include introductory remarks from Dr. Michael Barnett and introductory remarks from Stephen Golding. The keynote speaker, Reverend Kobe Little. We've got a big announcement to make, a really, really big announcement to make, and that's going to happen in less than a minute. Call your friends. Call your friends to call your friends to call your friends. We've got a massive announcement to make, and it's going to happen in less than a minute. In less than a minute. It's 6:59, and we're standing by for that breaking news. When we got such a big announcement, we have to draw for a Pan-African attorney at law. And so we're standing by. On the phone lines with us right now, with just 30 seconds to go before that big announcement, is Pan-African attorney at law, Bert Samuels. If we've got such a big announcement to make, then we have to have the attorney online. Good morning to you, Pan-African attorney at law, partner and head of litigation with the firm Knight, Jr. and Samuels. Bert Samuels. His areas of practice have centered on industrial relations and civil and criminal litigation. He's been practicing law in Jamaica for over 40 years, and he's currently a partner in the law firm Knight, Jr. and Samuels. We don't normally say so much about Bert, but we do have to say that this morning because we have to put into context and in context what we're about to talk about. Mr. Bert Samuels, a very big announcement coming from your law firm on behalf of a citizen of Jamaica. What is that announcement, sir?
Well, 2 weeks ago, when we interviewed each other after that debacle in Montego Bay, where the gentleman pleaded guilty without good advice, of course, to practice in Obi, and was sentenced by a African-Jamaican judge to 5 days or $5,000 for a fine. And we came on the program 3 days later, KABU, and I promised your audience in Jamaica that I will take on the unconstitutionality of the Obia Act in Jamaica, that it was an affront and an abridgment of the right to religious practices. And consequent on that promise to you, and came out of the discussion you and I had, so I'm instructed by KABU and the ancestors. We filed an action on Friday of this week. Friday's what date, KABU?
Today is the 18th. Saturday would be the 17th. Friday then would be the 16th. Friday
the 16th of May.
Yes.
We filed an action in the Supreme Court to challenge the Obia Act as being unconstitutional and in breach of 12 breaches of our Constitution, the right of persons to practice their religious and their spiritual beliefs without hindrance and without being treated as criminals and sent to prison.
And
so that's the breaking news.
This is a really big thing. This is really big. You heard it here first. Breaking news, an action filed in the Supreme Court. I want you to break that down for all of our listeners so that they can understand what that means. When we say an action has been filed in the Supreme Court, and you also talk about challenging the constitutionality of it. Break that down for all of our listeners, Bert.
Okay. So this is what happened. The last time the assembly in Jamaica in 1889, that would have been about 45, 60 years after our freedom, 1889, that act made it an offense to practice Obia in Jamaica. And the penalty was that you would go to prison and you would be whipped. So the Obia man was whipped as a part of punishment. And when we looked at the history of that law, we realized that our colonizers hated the fact that we brought our spirituality here, and they wanted to stop it and Christianize us into their religion. And they figured the best way to do it was not to preach to us, was not to have a church and have us converted, was that to make it criminal for us to continue with our spirituality. And what they did, KABU, was to make Obia seem to be so evil that the person, Professor Hutton, who is the applicant in this matter, he opined as an historian that they treated obeah as if it was worse than slavery. Let me repeat that. They made us believe, and some people in your audience today think that obeah is worse than slavery. So we have to have a change in the mindset. So we went to the court, and I looked at the Charter of Rights, which is a 2011 charter, and we picked up 12 breaches of the Constitution in this act, this old act.
Can you take us through them, or do you want to just identify some? Because we'd like to know the main concept. I've looked at it too, and brilliant work. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing, Bert Samuels. What are the main constitutional grounds? And you mentioned Professor Hutton, of course, as a person who, and we want to come back to that, who's brought this case, if you will. So the main constitutional grounds on which Professor Hutton's case is being brought, what are they?
Fine. So firstly, the Jamaican Constitution at Section 17 says everyone has a right to practice their religious beliefs. So the fact that, and Professor Hudson has made out obeah to be a religion brought from Africa. So for all these years, for over a century and a half, the law has been on the books that to practice obeah is a criminal offense. It is the only religion that has been made a criminal offense in Jamaica. So that by itself is one of the breaches of the Constitution. That is the right of everyone to practice their religious beliefs. 1. 2, we said that there's no equality in the law because Indians come on television on Sundays and other days of worship for Christians, and they propagate their palm reading, their fortune telling, and they put it on television and publish it. And the obeah man has to be hiding between rocks and crevices to practice his fortune telling. Mm-hmm. So we say that there is a clause in the Constitution that says we should have equality before the law. 2. Mm-hmm. 3, the other one is that if you go to the obeah man, if you consult with him, you yourself, his membership, his clientele, is guilty of a criminal offense. And therefore, there is a clause in the Constitution that gives you freedom of association. That we should be able to associate with IRFM, we should be able to associate with our church, associate with trade unions. We should not be prevented from gathering and associating. So that's a breach of our freedom of association. Mm-hmm. And then in the obeah Act, unlike any other law in Jamaica, when you are through doing your sentence, they say that you must now come under supervision, police supervision. And we say, no, you already served your sentence, and therefore the presumption of innocence is abrogated by that particular clause. It's the only law in Jamaica that says when you're done your sentence, not even a rapist right now is under police supervision after he's through with his sentence. Mm-hmm. And that is a horrible thing. Then they speak about the instruments of obeah. And we looked at other religions. And you saw Professor Clinton saying, listen, the Catholics have their cups. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has its vessels that it swings, it smokes, emitting from it, and the chalice is part of Catholic worship. Is the cup from which the blood of Jesus is in it, and it is drank as a sacrament. Those instruments are not criminal for other religions, but for obeah, any instrument they see, and we don't know what they call instruments of obeah because white people and English people don't know our spirituality. How they know what we use? Mm-hmm. So that's another ground that way. So those are the main grounds of the 12.
So this is precedent setting.
Oh yes. And I think the entire Caribbean, because the obeah law is right through. In Antigua in 1904, they brought some obeah men into the capital and publicly flogged them in Antigua. So this anti-obeah law is through the entire former British English-speaking Caribbean.
Mm-hmm. Bert, we know, and let's put this out there, that there are many critics who are against repealing the act, and they argue that this could open the door for fraud and exploitation. What's your concern with that, and how do you respond to that concern within, if you did, within the legal filing?
All right, so there it is. In the obeah Act, they start out by saying that the obeah man is a fraudist. that he collects your money and he creates a fraud. But almost every religious sector, the religious groups who pay tithe, who take up offering, who promise healing, other groups do it. But that's not seen as fraud. So the laws, the criminal laws, the laws against property, the Larceny Act takes care of fraudists. Mm-hmm. We're not encouraging fraudists by making this action. Mm-hmm. But there's a law that specially deals with that. Why are you saying that when the Obia man is collecting money, telling you what he's doing, the Indians who advertise on Sundays, you have to pay them? Mm-hmm. That's not treated as fraud. Mm-hmm. So you understand, it's a discrimination against, it's a self-hate. It's a self-hate thing where even members of our population. Now, I'm come from a Christian background, mm-hmm. but I think that Rastafari must enjoy their religious belief. Muslims must be able to practice their religious belief as much as I can practice mine. So if I am honest and truthful to the respect of the religions of others, I cannot bear and stand by and see you criminalizing one sector of spirituality and leaving the others untouched. You cannot do that.
We want to talk to you about the process of filing, what all of that entails, just so our listeners have as much information as possible. Let me just remind our listeners that this hour, 7 to 8 o'clock, is brought to you by the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. Thank you so much to the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs for being on board and sponsoring the Africa Forum. And that is not to say that we have spoken to the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs about the information that we are breaking, that the news that is breaking this morning.
The irony of it. The discussion is sponsored by the Ministry of Constitution.
It is purely...
Amen to that.
Yes, to that. Isn't it? It is purely coincidental. And then we put this is very interesting. Anyway, just to say the hour between 7 and 8 brought to you by the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. And to kind of put things in perspective once again, we have online Pan-African attorney at law, Bert Samuels. You're hearing this groundbreaking legal challenge that could redefine religious freedom and cultural sovereignty here on the island in Jamaica. And at the heart of this challenge is a controversial, if I may say so, Obia Act. And we know we have had lots of conversations about this with Bert Samuels and others.
I mean, you talking that. I must congratulate the Gleaner.
Yes.
Who's in the editorial on Tuesday says this nonsense must stop. Now, when a newspaper like the Gleaner can be saying this nonsense, the law against Obia is nonsense, it tells you that there is this platform in which people are now saying this is 2025. How could you be prescribing medicine from the bench for an Obia man?
Yes.
And telling him to go and read your Christian Bible as if you're forcing a man to comply with your religious beliefs.
Over the years that we, yourself and myself and others, have spoken about the Obia Act and the need to look at the colonial laws on the book, to repeal the colonial laws on the book, the Obia Act, of course, being one of them. You have always said in those discussions, Bert, that it's there, but thank heavens, it's not being used. But we, Jamaica woke up a few weeks ago, and you came on to talk about it, about a ruling in a court in Jamaica where a judge can say sentence, even though, because the person was sentenced to pay the fee or spend time in prison. Somebody who was brought before the court for practicing Obia. This, of course, as you said, got Jamaica talking. The Gleaner, as you pointed out, literally wrote an editorial. And when you see an editorial in a newspaper, it means this is the view of the ownership of the newspaper. So the Gleaner apologized on behalf of who?
Never seen that before.
The Gleaner apologized to the young man. This is brilliant. Then we saw a letter from Louis Moyston to the Gleaner on the very same thing. We also saw there was another a long article, a commentary, if you will, from Lloyd Barnett on the very same thing. Who is
a constitutional expert? And I tell you, kudos to Lloyd Barnett. He refuses to take King's counsel like myself. We do not bow to the king. And remember, every time I come on your program, I says, I am PC. I am the People's Counsel.
Yes.
I'm not the King's Counsel.
Yes.
It is the King of England and his ancestors who made the Obia Act. So how could I be one of his lawyers? Come on.
So in terms of a legal challenge, Bert, so you're saying, and this is a filing that the law directly violates the rights enshrined in Jamaica's Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, religious and human rights. And I want to talk a little bit. Let me take a break, but when I come back, I want to talk about the broader social impact and this that is now being filed in this legal and political climate that we're in. So let me take a quick break. This is Running African at 19 minutes after 7 o'clock. Groundbreaking news here on the island in Jamaica. You're hearing it for the very first time in this program this morning, that there has been a constitutional challenge, if you will. At the heart of this challenge, the controversial Obia Act, which is a colonial-era law that has long criminalized African-derived spiritual practices. And we had that in action just a few weeks ago on the island when a young man was charged, was given the sentence of paying or serving time in prison. And we have now on the island, Professor Clinton Hutton has taken legal action against the government of Jamaica, we can say that, asserting that the Obia Act violates the constitutional rights of Jamaicans to freedom of religion, expression, and cultural identity. He's represented by none other than a Pan-African attorney at law, Bert Samuels. He's a leading voice in Caribbean jurisprudence. He's a stalwart defender of Pan-African rights and justice. And he's helping us to understand what this means, this challenge to the Constitution. But we can't underscore this enough, that here we have while we're talking about the Constitution, because there's another ruling in another case regarding SOEs and so on that the court has ruled on.
Another day.
So the
I wanted to make a point.
Yes.
2 points.
Yes.
The first one is, did you tell me it's Haiti Day today?
Today is Flag Day in Haiti.
Okay, so why don't you make the link?
Why don't I make
the link? Make the link, KABU.
I should have made a link a long time ago, because this and this is when we talk about the wider Caribbean.
Yes, you did say that. Yes.
Because and you mentioned Antigua and so on, but Haiti, for example, we saw just before the revolution in 1804 that when Haitians got together, Bukmaduti and Cecile Fatiman and them, one of the things that they did was to go through these spiritual rituals, which they call voodoo in Haiti, but we have to understand voodoo within the context of the wider religious, in the same way that we understand Obia. So,
of course.
So we made that link on Haiti Day, on Flag Day in
Haiti. Of course, it is our day. The ancestors are awake, and that's why today the breaking news comes on their day, because they have been demonized.
Yes.
They want the Haitians to think that Haiti is poor because of voodoo. It's poor because the French have milked it and drained it, and the French parasites have stormed the economy of Haiti and trying to blame their poverty on voodoo. Mm-hmm. It is enslavement and colonialism. French colonialism is responsible for the poverty of Haiti, not voodoo. I mean, Clinton Hutton made the point to me in a discussion just before I filed the matter, that, Bert, if we didn't have that spirituality here, slavery would have mad all away.
And that
had to have that resort.
And that is a point. That's a really great point to be made in terms of going into your spirituality, understanding ourselves as spiritual beings, and going into that space for rituals. And praying is a ritual, and how you pray is a ritual. These are some of the things that post-traumatic slavery disorder causes us not to remember.
Indeed. But I don't want you to leave it out saying, KABU, you are responsible for this action being taken. Annals of history will show that 2-3 Sundays ago, KABU and I had a discussion, and that led to this action being taken. Don't take yourself out of the picture,
I refuse
KABU.
to. Thank you so much, Bert. I will not. I respect that. Thank you so much.
Big up to KABU, and
I
KABU,
appreciate
you need to
you.
let them know that every other day we were speaking and moving together, preparing this matter together. You're
Yes.
part of the preparation of it.
I
just couldn't let it go. I couldn't let it go, KABU.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Bert. The given your own Pan-African activism and your legal activism, do you see similar legal battles taking shape in other parts of the Caribbean or
Very
the
good
wider
question.
diaspora?
No, I remember when we took the action that Rastafarians who are brought to prison should not be trimmed. After that action was taken by me and we won, and they stopped trimming Rastafari as of the 2002, a number of Caribbean lawyers contacted me to get the papers from me, get the arguments from me, so they could lay it before their parliament and in court. And remember, we want to be the bookman of Jamaica. The bookman himself influenced that revolution, and the spirits that are down here and makes it possible that Jamaica takes the lead in some of these things. The ancestors' voices seem to be very loud in this part of the Caribbean. So yes, the question is, do other Caribbean islands, I expect them to come on board, because a lot of politicians are afraid to do what we are doing in KABU. They feel that the population, the section of the population that thinks Obia is so evil, that they would hurt that demographic. But we think that justice is for all. That's what we think, and we don't care.
So
we're not seeking votes; we are seeking justice.
And this is a legal challenge. This is cold. This is a cold case. No, well, not a cold case in terms of law, but this is an objective case that is being brought. What are the next legal steps in this case, and how can the public support the effort?
All right, fine. Here we go. So the matter was filed on Friday. We are serving the Attorney General on Monday, tomorrow, with the papers. Now, the Attorney General, when he looks at it, he has an option. He can say, listen, we're not going to resist this. We are going to consent to the fact that the Obia laws are unconstitutional. And it is my humble opinion that based on the papers filed and the history provided by Professor Clinton Hutton, kudos to you, Clinton, you came forward.
Yes.
When they read our papers, I'm confident they will say, no, this is irrefutable. This is, the Gleaner says, this is nonsense. The Gleaner newspaper says it's nonsense, not just KABU and I. So we think that the Attorney General may, and I hope he will, not fight this one, but will say, no, I agree, it ought to be off the books.
Against that background, do you anticipate resistance, and if so, from where?
Yeah, I think there may be some misinformed church leaders who may think that we are promoting fraud and things, but it's a public education history, because white supremacy is practiced by people among us. But I think that when you look at Clinton's affidavit, and the public will make it public, when he goes through the history of our enslavement, the history of spirituality and what it does for us, and what he says, because one of the things he says, I'm a researcher. So if I go to talk to Obia man and I'm in the midst of looking at his instruments as a researcher, a professor of history, I have committed a criminal offense. So it doesn't even allow research into our own culture, because the researchers have to handle these instruments. So, I think that it's a public education thing that is necessary.
What does this mean for other, because I know that the discussion on constitutional reform and the road to republic, that's a discussion that is ongoing. This is a process that is underway. But what does this mean for other colonial laws that are on the books that we don't necessarily see coming up in these conversations around the constitutional reform process, such as the Beach Management Act?
Yes, the Beach Management Act, which makes the waters on which we travel to come here as kidnapped people, that we are now kidnapped away from these beaches. That's a colonial law that is here. The practices too, the calling, opening the courts with saying, God save the king. Those are things that we must wipe out of our minds, and our constitution must deal with that. That there cannot be any reference to any person outside of the island of Jamaica, and any reverence or respect shown to them over and above the people. I wrote to the Chief Justice of Jamaica asking that we do not open the courts with God save the king, but rather with God save the people, or with all right, you don't have to have that kind of designation. In other words, the minds of Jamaican people in the court is that you can't get justice unless you open the court in the king's name, the oppressor's name. So those are some of the colonial practices that we have to wipe from our constitution.
So it's all systems go from here, because I hear you saying tomorrow the Attorney General will be served.
That's right.
And then what? So it's all systems go.
All system. I remember, KABU, you and I have a little peeve. We know that St. Mary, the Obeah men of St. Mary were chastised and targeted, and Taki was part of that. A lot of the leaders. Remember, in Clinton's affidavit, he speaks about an Obeah man in 1865 after the Morant Bay Rebellion, and it comes in the report on that rebellion that he was beheaded and placed on a pole in Morant Square to show people that they can conquer the Obeah man. The colonial powers executed him and took his head off and put it on a pole. That's a matter of historical record. It's in the report after the Morant Bay Rebellion. So what they tried to do is to use violence against the religion.
Bert, I want to thank you so much. This challenge is constitutional challenge. I think it's brilliant. I'm happy to be a part of it. Wrap up and tied up in it in all sorts.
And you provided a lot of the historical material that led to the action. Don't take yourself out of the picture.
I refuse.
Big up the authors. You remember their names?
Yes, Diane Diakete, off the top of my head, one of the main authors. And I really want to say thanks to Professor Clinton Hutton for standing in the gap and bringing this. And I know the call was made here, and so many persons came forward.
Of course, and KABU, remember, we are writing our history now. We have a historian from the soil.
Yes. Thank you so much.
And I know that Professor Vereen Shepherd, she waited for this day for a long while.
Of
Big up Vereen.
Of course. Big up Prof.
St.
Shepherd.
Mary girl.
Of course. Chief Tachi's daughter. Thank you so much, Bert. And we'll continue this once again. This is breaking news. This is ongoing news. This is the first time you're hearing this anywhere in the world. Jamaica, a constitutional challenge here in Jamaica on the books, legally in place. The Attorney General will be served tomorrow. Bert Samuels is on this, the attorney representing Professor Clinton Hutton, a challenge to the Obeah Act so many years after, from 1760 to 2025. And here we are. Thank you so much, Bert.
One love.
Give thanks.
Don't joke with cans, tomato, ketchup, richer, thicker, and more affordable.
The time is
now 7:31. We're standing by for our next very special guest online, but let me take another break and come right back. In this segment of the program, we are standing by to speak with Dr. Darius Figueroa, social researcher and author. The books and articles he published are instances of the utilization of the liberationary methodology, which deconstructs hegemonic discourse to expose its destructive constructs vitally necessary to disrupting this discourse's ability to exercise power. His first book writing period stretched from 2002 to 2014, where he concentrated on the illicit trades of the Caribbean, with 3 books in 2004, 2006, and 2012. And this is where we want to go to. We want to go this morning to focus with Dr. Darius Figueroa on these very issues, trafficking in the Caribbean, looking at the Caribbean widely, but specifically on Jamaica. Dr. Darius Figueroa is joining us on the phone lines. Thank you so much, my brother Darius Figueroa, for joining us live from Trinidad and Tobago, where you're currently residing. Welcome to the Africa Forum.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my sister, and thank you for the invitation.
We're very happy to have you online. To welcome to our listeners from all across the 7 continents. Let me just tell you that we have been promoting this and getting the responses from our listeners, so we know people are tuned in from all across the Caribbean and from these 7 continents, people with interest in what we're about to talk about, which is trafficking in the Caribbean, which of course is your speciality. But I want to first of all start with your background, Dr. Figueroa. What got you interested in looking at the illicit trades in the Caribbean? You've got 3 books, one in 2004, 2006, and then 2012 on this. What caught your attention and got you interested in doing this academic research?
Well, what happened to me in 1969 when the Black Power Revolution hit Trinidad and Tobago, I was 15 years old.
Yes.
And I was deeply impacted by the discourse of Black Power. And what I noticed during the course of 69-70 is that whilst we were involved in this great ferment to question all that came before and the whole neo-colonial condition, at the same time we were marching in the streets and shouting power, the illicit drug trade suddenly exploded in Trinidad and Tobago, perpetrated by the Colombian Dons. And in 69-70, I said to myself, was this simply coincidence or is it deliberate?
Mm-hmm.
And from 69-70 to now, I have continued to delve into its evolution, because now we are in the 5th evolutionary stage.
And this is very interesting because I've been listening to you closely. I listened to an interview that you gave in Belize, for example, just recently. I was shocked. I mean, we have been covering a lot of this, but not from the perspective of someone like you, looking through your lenses, understanding transnational organized crime in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, in Belize, through a whole different lens in terms of just focusing on gangs. You connected transnational organized gangs, literally, in the Caribbean, back to transnational organized crime. And I want to come to that just to kick things off. But before we do that, can I ask you to hold for just a bit for me while I take a break and come back? Time on Ira FM, it's 7:38. This hour between 7 and 8 o'clock is brought to you courtesy of the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. My very special guest on the line is Dr. Darius Figueroa, and we're looking at transnational organized crime in Jamaica and the Caribbean. Dr. Darius Figueroa, this is of specific and critical importance to Jamaica. Now we're hearing in every newscast, the police high command tells us that the rise in crime, or the crime that we're seeing around us, the violent and vicious murders and killings on the island in Jamaica, are connected to internal gang warfare. But you are saying that we need to understand the nature of the game. What is the nature of the game?
Well, what we must understand, firstly, all peoples of the Caribbean must understand this discourse of gangs that is presently being bandied about throughout the Caribbean was formulated in the North Atlantic, especially in the United States of America. It's a white supremacist discourse formulated to deal with the criminalization of the minority non-white races of America. So the white supremacist position is that non-white people who are inherently inferior can never create on their own initiative organized crime. All they have the mental capacity to create is gangs. Mm-hmm. So a non-white in a gang is entirely different and inferior to a white person in organized crime as the Aryan Brotherhood and the Italian Mafia.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing we must understand. Then they produce legislation that is supposed to control gangs. in the United States of America, which have been a singular failure in the jurisdictions in which they were applied.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the United States of America, the means by which they attain the highest number of prosecutions against gang members are using not the gang act, but homicide, drug trafficking, human smuggling, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So it was imported into the Caribbean on the insistence of the colonial overlord that we must have gang legislation, anti-gang legislation.
Mm-hmm.
The political class of the Caribbean readily embraced it without critique, without criticism. What that has done now over the years is to deliberately mask the reality that there is a gangland in the Caribbean that was directly created by transnational organized crime to serve transnational organized crime.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no way we can understand that gangland and dismantle that gangland until we understand the transnational organized crime business model that drives that gangland.
Let us
and
talk
what
about...
we must understand
Yes.
in the Caribbean is that in the Caribbean today there are two business models of transnational organized crime that are in conflict with each other. Mm-hmm. So what we have throughout the Caribbean today is no longer two ganglands, but three. Gangland under the Colombian Dons, gangland under the Mexican transnational trafficking organizations, and gangland not affiliated to either of the above.
Break them down for us, please.
Pardon?
Break them down for us, please. Help us to understand. So the three ganglands, and you say you're seeing them evolving, or at least two evolving into a third. Let us look at the business models then that you mentioned, and to break down these three different ganglands.
The Colombian business model is the oldest dominant business model of the Caribbean since the 1970s. So what has happened, it is now in its fourth evolution. Mm-hmm. So that business model has not varied much. It is extremely hierarchical.
Mm-hmm.
It is extremely unequal. The apex reaps all the riches and the wealth derived from the labor of the broad base. It is highly violent,
mm-hmm.
indisciplined, with a penchant for recklessness. And what we must understand in the Caribbean, the Colombian paramilitary dons also believe in political agendas that must be driven by the drug traffickers to ensure the protection of the enterprise. So they are not opposed to politically destabilizing a country in which they are operating in order for them to control the state. And that is what is happening in Haiti. They have deliberately destabilized Haiti. They got rid of Jacques Bertrand Aristide and they killed President Moïse.
And so you're saying, and this is part of the wider transnational organized crime under the Colombian business model.
Yes. The Mexican model is entirely different. Entirely different. The Mexican model is premised upon a regime of discipline as a military organization. They demand military discipline within their organization.
Mm-hmm.
They do not sell their product to third parties. All their products are retained within the organization. They are much more equitable in the distribution of wealth amongst their members. and they have an entirely different menu of products and activities from the Colombians. So the Mexicans concentrate on synthetic drugs, not plant-based drugs. And they are at the leading edge of 21st century innovation with their cyber security capacity to assault databases, to capture identities, to loot it. So they are not into this old jam and wine business model.
Mm-hmm.
They are highly technologically sophisticated at the leading edge of the 21st century AI innovation process.
So
they are constantly evolving.
I want to come back and look at and spend some time on that, but also to look at what have you found within the Jamaican context? Is it the Colombian business model, the Mexican, or we're moving into something else? Let me take a quick break, Dr. Figueroa, and I'll come back.
Safe, reliable, great value. Always buy from an authorized IGL dealer. The time by IGL is
now 7:47. You're inside of the Africa Forum. This is Running Africa, and this segment of the program, the hour between 7 and 8 o'clock, is brought to you courtesy of the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. We're looking at transnational organized crime in Jamaica and the Caribbean. My very special guest online is Dr. Darius Figueroa. And please check his books, because there are many books. We're going to be telling you about them later on. He's been doing the research on this for many years. He's gone really deep into what's happening in the Caribbean, why we are where we are, and who are the main players. Dr. Figueroa, let's talk about Figueroa, because we do have Figueroa on the island here. What
Yes.
is it, in understanding the Jamaican context, what business model have you seen evolving over time?
All right. Well, today, presently, Jamaica is in transition. I term the Mexican model Pax Mexicana. Pax Mexicana is present and alive in Jamaica, along with the model of the Colombian Dons. What we must understand, the initial militias on the ground that served the politicians of Jamaica were soon embraced by the Colombian Dons, and they became independent of the political back and forth by going into the illicit trades. So there was a specific evolution in Jamaica that is unique, where you have groups in Jamaica affiliated to the Colombian Dons evolved into transnational organized crime status in themselves and continued to flirt with the politicians whilst they were drug traffickers in their own right. The change in the Jamaican reality began from the time, show your mind back in Jamaica, to when the violence broke out in Montego Bay. When the violence broke out of its traditional environment in Kingston and the areas around Kingston and migrated north to Montego Bay, that was the signal to those of us who understand the conflicting business models that the counter model had now arrived, because Montego Bay is the command and control center of the illicit trades in Jamaica.
And so the counter model arriving to challenge the Colombian model, which was, if you backtrack a bit and help us to understand that old model, and then this counter model that arrived, and the signal to those who know was when that, because we were wondering about it, you see. It was the strangest thing on the island, that violence that broke out in Montego Bay. But I hear you putting this in context to say this was a gang, a transnational organized crime operatives literally fighting for turf on the island.
Yes, what happens is that the Mexicans come in and they start to recruit sets from gangland that they need, because the Mexicans have a preference for gangland. since they do not sell their product to third parties, the Mexicans don't deal with the drug trafficking oligarchs of the Caribbean. Their preference is to build their organization from the ground up by recruiting the very best, the creme de la creme of the set that they find on the island. So from the time the process started, where persons are now walking out from organizations under the Colombian dons that are at war with each other, and they are crossing over into the Mexican discipline, and the war ends under the discipline of the Mexicans, and nobody is no longer. Former enemies are now brothers in arms, creating a brand new organization, and the Colombian dons and their organizations react to that by attacking them. It's the same thing happened in the United States of America. That is why South Central LA and Eastern LA has now gone quiet, because of the same process of recruitment and transformation of gangland in America.
So that the transformation is, you're saying this, the new business model is now under Pax, what you call Pax Mexicana, and that is, so this conflict, who's winning this war?
Well, you see, in Jamaica, there are different levels of the war. There continues to be killing within the zinc-fenced communities of the marginalized people. And then there continues to be the war between the sets who walked away and those who are still under the Colombian Don discipline, and they must prosecute the war. But what you must understand is that what the Pax Mexicana is in Jamaica for is entirely different from what the Colombian Dons are there for, because the strategy, the Caribbean strategy of Pax Mexicana is entirely different.
Yes.
Because Pax Mexicana has control of Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
And Puerto Rico is their gateway to the eastern seaboard of the United States. And that is where Jamaica is now being pulled into the vortex. Because remember, there is a pipeline that connects Jamaica to Honduras.
Mm-hmm. And by pipeline, you mean?
So,
a drug pipeline?
A trafficking route.
A trafficking route. Would it be drug, human?
A trafficking route, yes. That in the game we call it a pipeline.
Yes.
Because it's back and forth, you also.
Mm-hmm.
The next involvement of Jamaica, we must understand, is the involvement is the connection of Jamaica to Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
Jamaica has now been integrated into the business model in Haiti.
And
Jamaica's...
Go ahead.
Yeah, and Jamaica's transnational organized crime big contribution to the business model in Haiti is teaching the Haitians the ganja game. And now in the island of Hispaniola, it is Haitians who control the ganja game in the Dominican Republic.
There's an interesting relationship developing between Jamaica and the Dominican Republic, which boggles the mind. We can't, as for those of us as deep thinkers, critical thinkers, and investigative journalists, we're trying to find answers, and it's a handful, to this burgeoning, evolving new relationship where visas requirement, for example, that has been taken away. Now Dominican Republicans can come, Dominicans can come right into Jamaica. There's also a real body-body relationship between the heads of state, and there's a whole new mushrooming relationship between Jamaica and the Dominican Republic that we do not understand. But I hear you saying that there's a wider context. I heard you say well there, Dr. Figueroa. You said, well, this should be understood within what context?
Yes, because what you must understand, the Dominican Republic is the last stand of the Colombian Dons in the Caribbean archipelago. And it is under assault from Pax Mexicana. The Dominican Republic has always been the command and control center of the Colombian Dons in the Caribbean, going all the way back to the Medellin Federation. And now it is under assault. And one perfect way to assault it is Haiti is next to the DR. And the drug trafficking oligarchy of the Dominican Republic has extensive business interests in Haiti. So the Dominican Republic has the imperative now to reach out, to look for friends, because their overlord is being strangled. Because what has happened to their overlord is that he has lost the last vestige of his presence in the United States illicit market was the eastern seaboard of America, and he has lost it. Pax Mexicana has evicted him. So he has now turned to Europe, and they are turning the Dominican Republic into the number one entrepot shipping point for cocaine into the European Union. Dominican Republic has been transformed from getting shipments and then moving to America, and they are now getting shipments and now moving to Europe. And the entire Eastern Caribbean is now looking towards Europe, not America, because remember, Pax Mexicana destroyed the cocaine market of America with fentanyl and methamphetamines, synthetic drugs. So now they have to go to Europe and dump all the cocaine, because right now in Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia, there are mountains of coca leaves rotting on the ground. There is no market.
And the reason for this is this new evolving Pax Mexicana that you're talking about, which is still transnational organized crime. I would want to help us to understand Pax Mexicana and how what's the business model and how it functions.
Pax Mexicana was a creation. What we must all understand in the Caribbean is that without the Mexican and Mexican investment, there would have been no Colombian cocaine trade. Mexicans were always behind the creation of Medellin Federation, carry all of them. Because Mexican money and the Mexican crossing points into America were the chief smuggling points into America. But when the Colombians changed their business model from being horizontally integrated, where they control from production to retail sales, and decided to wholesale their kilo bricks, there were Mexican backers who walked away and set up their own organization. Whereas there were Mexicans who continued to run with the Colombian Dons. People like El Chapo.
Mm-hmm.
So this distinct Mexican model is very much similar to what obtained in the early days with Medellin and Cali, but even much more disciplined, much more rigorous, and much more technologically innovative.
Mm-hmm.
So what has happened is that this business model is driven by a discourse of race termed La Raza.
La Raza.
This is La Raza, an anti-colonial, anti-neocolonial discourse which insists that we, the native people of Mexico, has been ravished and trampled by hundreds of years of domination by the gringo. All the gringo has afforded us is the illicit trades. They have underdeveloped us, plagued us with arrested development, assaulted our non-white cells with their white supremacist assault. We will then grasp what we have been given, the illicit trades, and we will develop the illicit trades to its maximum extent to bring down massa.
Mm-hmm. You know, we heard a similar argument coming out of Montego Bay at the beginning of the violence that was linked back to cybersecurity issues, scamming and so on, using the internet. And what we heard from the scammers, which is what they're called in Jamaica, is that this was reparations. It is sounding very similar to what you're telling us the Pax Mexicana model is.
And they have their own belief system. It is called Santa Muerte.
Santa Merce.
Yes, say that. They have their own belief system. They have their own brujos and brujas.
Mm-hmm.
They have their own cosmology.
We're seeing it in Jamaica.
Yes. And when you see it in practice on the ground, certain practices, you see the practices of Santa Muerte when they take out an enemy and then visit his grave, dig it up, expose the body and do their ritual on the body.
We're seeing it in Jamaica.
They also have the practice of taking heads.
We're seeing it in Jamaica.
They will take your head.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
Because they are not recklessly violent. They are cold and calculating.
So this is a new model. It's not the Colombian model. This is very interesting because I can hear the collective gasp across the island of Jamaica because you just described what we are experiencing.
Yes. And in the United States of America, gangland in the United States of America is mortally afraid of them. Mortally afraid of them. They speak about the Mexicans and they literally shake.
You've said that this is also a very well-disciplined and well-organized federation, if you will. Because you're saying these are not cartels, these are federations.
Yes.
You've also tied them into the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Innovation.
Yes.
Expound upon that first.
From the outset, they are insisting that they must be leading edge. So from the outset, with their formation in the days when they were working with the Colombians and the cocaine, they would take their children and send them to the best business schools in the world. They believe in central planning. They believe in the fact that this is a business that must constantly generate and accumulate wealth. So that is why they are always at the leading edge of developing synthetic drugs. They are producing derivatives of fentanyl that the legislative bodies of the North Atlantic don't even have time to catch up with them and declare them to be illegal. And they are right there in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic producing the fentanyl derivatives. And this is not my conjecture. This is a statement of the U.S. Homeland Security that they have sounded the alarm that the DR is now an offshore fentanyl derivative production base in the Caribbean for export to Puerto Rico and America. There's fentanyl in Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm sure if you go and look in Jamaica, there's fentanyl there.
So
that is the business model.
So we find the Colombians in a state of crisis.
Yes, and that is why they are so recklessly and mindlessly violent, because their business model has collapsed. The Mexicans taught the Afghans how to manufacture industrial grade amphetamine, what you call ice. They also taught the Afghans how to extract fentanyl from opium paste. So the Afghans are no longer taking their opium paste and turning it into heroin. They're now turning it into plant-based fentanyl derivatives and flooding the world with it.
And I hear you say...
They have taught the Nigerian traffickers how to produce ice. And now the Nigerian traffickers are major producers of ice in the world and smugglers.
And we hear coming out of Ghana right now that they too are battling in a serious way with the influx of these kinds of criminal activities on the west coast of Africa, yes. Ghana in particular. There is if you could look at the Caribbean water for us and connect it back to Africa. And I know I'm asking you to do something which is just going to be words, but we all can, Google our Jamaica, on the map and our Jamaica in relation to West Africa, and help us to understand what that whole network is like. Who is sending to who? Why is Jamaica so strategic? Why is Belize so strategic? And how Honduras is involved?
Well, what we have to understand is that the island archipelago are simply stop-off points on the way to the consumer nations of the North Atlantic, and you will have a series of stop-off points by which you can mask the flow of your product to maximize your effort to beat interdiction. So you will not have a single pipeline. You will have multiple pipelines. And you will have primary and secondary transition points. So there are primary transition points in the Caribbean, there are secondary transition points in the Caribbean, and there are transition points waiting to be awakened because the apparatus is already on the ground. And when strategy dictates, they go into these two-tier markets and awaken them.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a strategic play. What you must understand, West Africa, the move from the Caribbean to West Africa is nothing new.
Yes.
What is new now is the linking of Brazil to West Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a series of West African states that are now under the control of the traffickers, the latest one being the Ivory Coast. So the problem in Ghana is because Ghanaian transnational organized crime is part of that trafficking network a long time ago, just as Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
They are fully embraced by transnational organized crime.
Mm-hmm.
And transnational organized, the two business models are present.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I could tell you, my sister, since the decade of the 1990s, the Mexicans were in Africa doing the research to set up offshore cocaine production platforms in Africa by growing the coca bush in Africa and turning it into cocaine, powdered cocaine to ship to Europe. They were in the Democratic Republic of Congo with their agronomists putting the plants down in the ground and creating hybrids to create that platform. Mm-hmm. That is how long this process has been ongoing. They have since squashed that because they have replaced it with synthetic drugs. But the synthetic drugs are flooding Africa. There is still the overland route of product from West Africa to North Africa to Libya and from Libya to Europe. There's still that old route.
Mm-hmm. And so that we can
primary route now.
Yes, go ahead.
The primary route now is from Brazil, Eastern Caribbean, across. You go by way of West Africa, then you go to the Canary Islands, you drop off in the Canary Islands, or you head straight to Galicia in Spain and you drop off. Whereas the Mexicans, they take their product into the Mediterranean and into the Black Sea and up along the North Sea into Germany and Scandinavia. Because Pax Mexicana in Europe is partnered with the most powerful transnational organized crime groups in Europe, like the Ndrangheta. So they have literally squeezed the Colombian entry into Europe. Literally squeezed them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to the Netherlands today, the Netherlands is the druglandia of Europe. And the violence in the Netherlands is mind-boggling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that when we see, so there is a disruption, and you can, after studying for a while, you know what's at play in terms of how the different business models impact the social order. For example, in Belize, in Haiti, in Trinidad and Tobago, in Jamaica.
Well, in Jamaica and in the rest of the Caribbean, you always, if you monitor gangland, the first reality you will see is that within gangland, the change within gangland, certain groups now begin to change in nature. They become very, very disciplined. The recklessness is over, and they begin to show the wealth that they are creating and amassing on the ground. Their members begin, their quality of life dramatically increases. Their families, the quality of life dramatically increases. You see the wealth that is passed to the foot soldiers of the organization, literally changing the lifestyle of the group, unlike the Colombians. And that is the first sign of the change on the ground. The next sign in the change of the ground, as Pax Mexicana business model takes hold over specific spaces, is the improvement in the life of the persons in the spaces Pax Mexicana controls. Because they begin the process now of raising the living standard of the persons within the spaces they dominate through various means by which they encourage means to generate income within the community that circulates in the community and stays in the community. The most potent one device that you have seen roll out in the United States and in Brazil is ghetto tourism.
Mm-hmm. Can we see
so
that?
You come into the ghetto safe. While you are there, your safety is assured. You dance, you prance, you get what you want, you do what you want, and you leave safe.
Hmm.
And you see the change within the community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in the context of the zinc-fenced marginalized spaces of Jamaica, people readily embrace this new business model because of what it gives back to the community.
This is frightening.
Unlike the Colombians.
You know, this is frightening, Brother Darius, and I'm telling you why this is frightening. Because obviously this is your life's work. You're an academic. You're a former lecturer at the University of the West Indies. This is your life's work. So you know what you're saying. You've done the research and you continue to do the ongoing research. But so much of what you're saying resonating with us here on the island of Jamaica, especially within the Pax Mexicana context, that I find it frightening. I am going to take a break. And I am going to... Let me take a break. I'll come back. Hold the line for me, please, Brother Darius. Just going into the break, I told you, Brother Darius, and we just have about 10 minutes to go. So I'm going to just pose a question and then have you talk us through this in terms of how then do we even begin to address this? Who are so we see local players, and yes, we're seeing the wealth. Yes, the wealth is open. We're very aware of what's happening there. And we're experiencing some of the violence in terms of the heads taken, et cetera, et cetera. I don't even want to go over all of these things. But we are experiencing what you have described as the evolving business model of Pax Mexicana on the island. Where do we go from here? How do we begin to address this? Is this a politician thing? Is this a military thing, a police thing, a security, private sector? How do we even begin to address this?
Well, from the outset, it must be understood that Pax Mexicana has no political agenda. They don't bribe politicians. Anybody in the state apparatus who is strategically important to them, they turn you into a drug trafficker. You must be part of the organization. And remember, in Pax Mexicana's organization, if you are part of the organization, they hold a close member of your family hostage. So the message to the politicians is that we move into the spaces of the marginalized, they target the spaces of the marginalized, they target gangland, and we intend to win their hearts and minds. So we are not coming as a violent occupying force as the Colombian dons. We intend to become organic with the masses. And the masses in turn will become one with us. So if you continue to have this old, failed attitude towards dealing with marginalized people, with intervening into the lives and spaces of marginalized people and understanding what is the reason for the marginalization and discriminating in their favor to end it, Pax Mexicana is going to do it for you, and you would not like the outcome, because eventually what the outcome will be in Jamaica is that they will move uptown, as what is already happening in Trinidad, because in Trinidad everybody knows well where to go uptown and get what they want. So this invisible barrier that is police between uptown and downtown in Jamaica will soon collapse, because they will now move uptown to get what they want. And that is, so this long time relationship in Jamaica where you police the barrier between uptown and downtown and you leave downtown in their misery, that is now being dismantled by Pax Mexicana. Look at how it is being dismantled in Haiti. And that is the lesson for the politicians of Jamaica to learn. That is a new era and time for a new politics.
What would this new politics look like?
Pardon?
What would this new politics look like?
Well, they will have to go back and learn from Michael Manley. Mm-hmm. That is a starting point.
But
that is the reality.
Yeah, but you have suffered a whole lot, personal to your own, your ability to earn, your ability to practice your scholarship as a result of your research and what you have been making available to Caribbean people, Latin American people on a whole. Talk to us about that, because you have suffered some serious consequences.
Well, what has happened to me is that I am completely bold in what I speak publicly and what I write and publish publicly. So what happened to me is that there is a concerted effort that I must never work in Trinidad and Tobago. So I have not worked since the 1st of January 2015. I have never, ever worked in Trinidad after they got hold of me from UWI St. Augustine. Governments come, governments go. I offer my services, no takers.
And yet
they have done their endeavor best in destroying my PhD. Feel free. Mm-hmm. It is now coming to 2 decades my PhD is under examination at the university.
And yet you have you have become a resource person internationally to persons from all over the world who have reached out to you, having read your work.
There are more persons who come and find me from the North Atlantic than persons who come and find me from successive governments of Trinidad and Tobago.
So there is. Do you feel? Well, obviously, 2 decades. Are you aware, or do you know that there is a deliberate strategy to silence you? Maybe not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but Caribbean-wide. Considering we're talking also about the University of the West Indies.
I don't expect to be welcomed by no regime in the Caribbean. Maybe I will be welcome in Cuba. I don't know. But I don't expect no open arms.
And then one of the things is because your scholarship, you have tied politicians, private sector, minorities within the Caribbean as being deeply situated and leading, if not leading, the transnational organized crime over time since the 90s.
Yes. Arising from the second half of the decade of the 1990s when the Colombians changed their business model. The most powerful Caribbean oligarchs we have today are all drug traffickers, and they are all from minority races. So we don't have African oligarchs in the Caribbean, African oligarchs who are drug traffickers. They are all from the minority races.
Because one of the things
they have reached
yes, go ahead.
Yeah. And they have reached that position of power in the Caribbean because of their drug trafficking. No if, but no maybe.
You see, because
so it's a built-in racist division of labor that works in the Caribbean to the detriment of the African people.
I want to continue my conversation with you, if you don't mind. And I noticed that wherever you go, you're asked to come back. I noticed that in Belize, you've been asked to come every first Tuesday, every first Sunday in the month, in each month for how long? And I understand why, having this conversation with you, that we've just really begun to, this is like an introduction. We really do have to go deeper. Yes. I want to hear more about Pax Mexicana and also your kind of go through some of what you've already written. Persons online are asking about your books. There are so many books that you've written, but in terms of Jamaica, I'll just say quickly to our listeners, Cocaine and Heroin Trafficking in the Caribbean, the case of Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica and Guyana. That is one. Is there any other that our Jamaican audience can quickly tap into? But the questions are coming from all over the world, actually.
No. Okay. I am not added to, but I intend to, as long as I'm alive, that book with Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica and Guyana, to revise it by updating. I'll update Jamaica.
Yes.
I'll bring Jamaica up to Pax Mexicana.
Yes. We're looking forward to that, and we'll definitely be reaching out to you again, Brother Darius Figueroa, to kind of break this down some more and to focus more, to zoom in more now on Jamaica. Thank you so much, my brother.
Yes.
This was eye-opening. This was insightful. This was really, it's frightening, it's shocking, but it's eye-opening at the same time.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much, my brother.